Good morning and welcome to Forth's Utility Working Group webinar. We'll get started in just a few more minutes as we wait for a few last minute attendees to join us. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome again. This is the Forth's Utility Working Group webinar for Q3 here in 2019. My name is Kelly Yerrick and I'll be moderating the webinar today. I'd like to cover a few logistical details about the webinar. Please note that you will be muted throughout the webinar and will be unable to unmute yourself. In order to ask questions of our speakers, please use the attendee chat feature. You can access this by clicking the button on the top left corner of your screen. I will be monitoring questions as they come in, and we'll get them answered at the end of the presentation. We'll also be sending out the presentation slides and webinar recording after the webinar ends. I'll begin by briefly introducing Forth for those of you who may not be familiar with us. Forth is a nonprofit trade association advocating for electric, shared, and smart mobility. We work in 4 focus areas: innovation, demonstration projects, advocacy, and consumer engagement. Based in Portland, Oregon, we have over 160 member companies and organizations, including many global automakers, utilities, and local governments. You can find more information about Forth, including membership and our other events, on our website at forthmobility.org. If you've attended this working group webinar in the past, you may notice that the format will be a bit different today. Today, we will be highlighting 5 of Forth's member companies that offer solutions and strategies for utilities interested in advancing their transportation electrification efforts. Our speakers will be helping us address some of the major challenges associated with educating consumers about electric vehicles and what solutions are available to utilities today. First, I'd like to let each speaker introduce themselves and their company, and then we'll move into questions. I'll turn it over to Matt Teske of Chargeway first.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, my name is Matt Teske with Chargeway. I'm the founder and CEO. And Chargeway specifically is, many people ask us, what is it? Well, we've been focusing on creating an easy way to explain electricity as a fuel type to the general public. And if you work for a utility, you produce the fuel. And so our goal and focus is to help you more effectively translate how to use this new fuel type to consumers that are very familiar with using terms like regular or premium to get their fuel type for cars they've driven for a long time. But in order to do so, Chargeway, we focused on, again, explaining the fuel type as electricity by removing the engineering and using something as simple as colors and numbers, colors to identify plug types, numbers to identify power levels. And this allows for a simple way to educate both consumers and other stakeholders, as well as connecting the EV industry as a whole. And look forward to reviewing more of what we're working on today.
Thank you, Matt. Next up is Javier-Barry of DNR International.
Thank you, Kelly. Let's try to move these slides here. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you. So my name is Javier-Barry, and I'm with DNR International, Senior Account Manager. And along with our partner, Yenter Group, we offer 2 services to utilities. The first is we offer an online platform that empowers utilities to educate their customers about electric vehicles. And the second is that we help utilities build their EV ally network. Those are dealerships where your customers can buy EVs to the electrical contractors who can install the charging equipment. And so Choose EV is the online platform that allows for easy access to information. Just in a couple clicks, your customers, the myriad of questions about electric vehicles, can get their questions answered. So there's tools that vary from FAQs to savings calculators, carbon reduction calculators, to tools that review all the models that are available for EVs, PHEVs, to directories of dealerships and EV charger installers. And we're also beginning to offer some commercial tools like fleet calculators. On top of the software, we want to help you build the market. So that's the engagement with dealerships, electrical contractors, and it's developing the vetted dealerships for the directories that your customers can use, so that you can have confidence that through those directories your customers can find the right dealerships or contractors to purchase the EVs or install their equipment.
Great. Thank you, Andre. Next up is Brian Boler of Clean Power Research.
Yeah, hi. I'm Brian Boler, lead product manager here at Clean Power Research, where I've spent 7 years leading the Watt Plan product team in developing software that addresses some of the most important challenges that are facing utilities and their customers. Our company is made up of over 50 experts in both energy and software, based in Napa, California, and Kirkland, Washington offices. At our core, we develop and license software as a service products that help energy companies and end consumers make intelligent energy decisions. And as our name would suggest, we're committed to excellence in groundbreaking research. Our research findings, whether it's new use cases or approaches, new algorithms, all feeds into our software, giving us the opportunity to have the greatest impact on this industry. So for the past couple of decades, we've worked with utilities to help advance their distributed energy resource, or DER, programs. Our products, Watt Plan, Power Clerk, and Solar Anywhere, help our utility customers make sense of and thrive amid this energy transformation. We help people make informed energy decisions, whether it's choosing the best rate plan or getting estimates on new energy technologies like EVs, solar, battery storage. Our self-service tools are there to guide customers through their decision-making journeys with trusted and personalized advice. We also streamline the integration of these new technologies through instant enrollment and optimized workflow management software for administering interconnection and incentive programs. And finally, we help better plan and operate the grid by predicting customer-level future DER adoption and its impacts on the distribution grid and resulting revenue for the utility. Additionally, our short-term distributed solar production forecasts enable grid operators to accurately assess the load they need to serve. Today, we count over 50 of the leading utilities, including IOUs, municipalities, and co-ops as our customers. We're viewed as a premier vendor when it comes to software as a service for DER programs. For the past 20 years, our utilities customers have trusted us with their growing needs that span the customer journey, whether it's from education to enrollment, administration of programs, or forecasting and operations, and that also span technologies from EVs to solar, battery storage, and beyond. Glad to be here today. Look forward to the interesting conversation.
Thank you, Brian. Olivier Pinçon of Zappy Ride will go next.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm Olivier with Zappy Ride. We focus on the EV space, EV customer engagement. And basically, when you look at EVs from a utility perspective, we think that there's huge potential in terms of load growth, in terms of load control, and in terms of customer satisfaction that utilities can reap from EVs. But to get all these benefits, you really need high quality customer engagement, and that's what we're really focusing on. I'm a utility guy. I've been in the utility industry for over a decade, and sadly seeing very often that customer satisfaction and engagement from utilities is not where it should be. We often see reports that customer satisfaction is not great, and we think that it needs to be great in the realm of EVs. why is it so challenging for utilities to be really high performance when it comes to customer engagement? Well, frankly, it's hard, right? There are challenges in getting it user-centric, making sure that we measure metrics and feedback. Utilities are not always very well supported by vendors who, tend to copy-paste more often than focus on customer. And so we've been seeing these obstacles for a while, and we're now trying to resolve these obstacles for EVs specifically. So our company, ZappyRide, really focuses on giving the customers the EV experience they deserve at every step of their EV journey. We do that with software and data in a way that's extremely specialized and extremely user-centric, focusing on the local circumstances, researching customers, making sure that utilities' efforts are data-driven and metrics-driven, and very agile too. We realize that the space is new, the customer experience is still a little bit undefined, and being able to iterate and provide great solutions that meet customer needs is really important. We are really fortunate to work with a couple of leading utilities who really want to provide this great customer experience in California quite a bit, but also nationwide. And it's been a great ride so far. Back to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Olivier. And finally, we have Mark Goody of FleetCarma, a division of Geotab, who will round out the speaker introductions.
Perfect. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you to Forth for hosting today's webinar. As Kelly mentioned, my name is Mark Goody, and I'm a Partner Account Manager of Utility Solutions here at FleetCarma. And my role here is to work with our utility partners to design and implement programs to help manage electric vehicle charging once adoption is at mass. So our goal here at FleetCarma is to enable clean, reliable, and affordable power for all homes by integrating electric vehicles into the grid smartly. So we do this with our product, which is called the Smart Charge platform, and specifically working with electric utilities in 3 areas. The first is to help utilities understand the potential impacts and opportunities that electric vehicles will bring to their local grid by doing smart charge profiling. So understanding EV charging behavior and how that will impact the distribution network, and using that data to also plan for future programs to manage that load at scale. The second is through gamification. So we provide programs with utility partners to help them incentivize EV owners to charge during desirable time periods to create smart and desirable load growth. And this is through a rewards program that's customer-controlled load shifting, which enables the EV owner to accumulate points by charging when it's most beneficial for the utility. And the third, and a little bit further down the road, is applying direct load control to the rewards program, where in real time the utility is able to dynamically control the charge of a vehicle, whether that's during peak periods or to help match EV charging with renewable energy integration. So together, our Smart Charge platform is geared to help utilities plan for and manage electric vehicle charging at scale.
Great. Thanks everyone for providing some background. Clearly we have a great deal of experience and perspective on this panel. So let's jump right into questions. And also I'll just remind each of you that you can submit your questions through the attendee chat on the left-hand side. So my first question is for you, Matt, from Chargeway. For many of us deeply invested in the EV space, talking about charging can sometimes sound very complicated and unapproachable. How can we best communicate about charging to customers given the complex nature of the equipment?
Thanks, Kelly. No, question-wise, that something comes up all the time is how are we translating the complexity of charging into something that consumers can use easily and simply. And just transitioning here into, there we go, into my first slide. So one of the things to that question, the question that often comes up is how do we communicate this? And this visualization of the slide on the screen is something that I think is very important for how we think about this as an industry. And if you are a utility, really seeing how this looks for where you fit into the customer journey for a consumer. So the gray icons you see here, those indicate what has been the typical customer journey for owning a car that runs on gasoline. And these stakeholders have helped make that work for near a century at this point. But we are transitioning this customer journey into a new one. These blue icons at the top represent the new stakeholders that a consumer needs to understand how to engage with and really appreciate and trust. And so instead of using gas stations and relying on fossil fuel companies for that fuel, we're now utilizing charging stations, and electric utilities now represent the new fuel provider. And I think that's the most important thing to really think about for how we communicate this is understanding the role that the stakeholders play. We need more electric cars on the road, and we want people buying electric cars, but they won't make that purchase unless they transition into understanding how to use the new fuel. And so we've focused on creating awareness and demand around that new unknown product, which is the fuel type. People understand cars, but they need to understand how to use the fuel. And so how we communicate this needs to be simplified. So from a utility strategy, we look at saying, well, you need to simplify the conversation around your product, which is the fuel, and really focus on these key categories, which are bringing awareness to the fact that that product exists. And then that allows for consumers to understand they actually can ask the question of, do I want a car that runs on this new fuel? Because when they're car shopping right now, they're not thinking of that. So awareness around the fuel leads them to a purchase experience that allows them to engage with the new shopping experience, which we then supplement with opportunity for engagement with dealers with our solutions. And then that moves them into the ownership experience. And through Charge, we've created a simple solution around how we show how charging works, again, with colors and numbers, as opposed to trying to create a vernacular around schematic drawings and engineering terminology that simply is not competitive against remembering words like premium and regular for understanding how to use your fuel. And then lastly, that moves into their experience with this product, and it helps them understand that, okay, it's easy to use. So from our side, we see like, how is this supposed to function? How does this work? And how do we communicate it simply? Is we have to have a strategy around communicating the new fuel type. And then through Charge, we've developed a variety of tools and solutions for utilities that allow that conversation to happen for both drivers and engagement with dealers through a branding element that allows people to understand and visualize that this new fuel type exists. At the end of the day, the goal is to understand and appreciate we have a language around electricity as a fuel type that is not competitive to gasoline. And in order for consumers to trust buying an electric car, they have to know they can trust the fuel. And that's what we're focused on developing and simplifying.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So my next question is for you, Andre. Given the complex nature of and challenges associated with EVs, utility companies will likely have greater success promoting EVs if they aren't sent down a rabbit hole of clicking through multiple pages, each with its own unique set of questions. How can the utility provide resources to their customers that are easy to find, easy to navigate, and easy to digest?
Thanks so much, Kelly. So the key thing to tackle is just basic education. Make it really easy to find the information your customers are looking for about electric vehicles. They're going to have a lot of questions, a lot of good questions about what EVs are, where to fuel them, how to charge them, just a number of questions. You want to be able to answer those questions in just a couple of clicks. And so as an example, here's a layout of a template of one of our utilities. And as you can see, it's in one place. The way that this particular format is set up, the different topics are in this tab format or file up top. So in one click, someone can get to the EV benefits, to the FAQs, savings calculators, CO2 reduction calculators, tools that review all the models in one place, to incentives and charger finders. Customers will always be asking about the fuel savings that they'll get. And so this savings calculator is an example of showing how much an electric vehicle can travel, how much further an electric vehicle can travel compared to a gasoline-powered vehicle for the cost of a gallon of gasoline. So in the bottom left here, we've got the price, the average price of gasoline for the service territory, which a customer can change if they want. And then they can select the make, model, and year of their existing gasoline-powered vehicle. The database that goes back to 1998. So, this is the customer story, their individual car. What is it? Then they can compare it with an EV and the make, model, and year of the EV that they're interested in. The kilowatt hour rates of the utility are automatically populated. If there are different time of use rates, those are taken into account as well and can be selected as well. And the utility can then give a customer what they can reasonably expect to save by switching to an EV from their current gasoline-powered vehicle. The second example, again, kind of keeping it simple, from one click, going from a calculator to a tool that lists all the models. This basically is a tool that is set up that all the EVs are located in one place. They can be filtered by manufacturer and sorted by the different attributes that people care about, whether it's price range, the time of charge, the time to take the charge time, or the range per vehicle, and the efficiency. And then finally, just one thing as well, again, in terms of keeping it simple, being able to click from that specific set of information, what the vehicles are available, to incentives, tax credits, promotions, whatever is being done by the utility to promote, or not only the incentives, but what's being done, perhaps ride and drives, to promote electric vehicles. Having them all in one place, having them printer ready, so that if a customer wants to print them, it looks fine when it prints, when they have a printout paper copy. And from what our utilities are telling us as well, roughly a third of customers are looking at the pages on their mobile devices. So pages need to be responsive, look great, whether it's on a, look great or easy to use, and engaging, whether it's on a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, or a mobile device. So basically, keep things easy to find and accessible so that your customers can navigate and find the information they need.
Great. Thank you, Andre. So now I have a follow-up question that I think would be well suited for both you and for Matt from Chargeway. How should utilities position themselves to work with dealerships and salespeople?
Well, I can dive right into this, Kelly. So one of the things that obviously we're focused on for how we can help utilities communicate with dealerships and salespeople is really looking at, what is the solution that they need. And at the end of the day, I think it's important to point out that every utility that is working to engage with consumers and dealers, you're relying on the dealerships to sell your product for you, which is the fuel. And right now, dealerships are completely unaware that that's even something they have to do, because they don't have to think about that with gas cars. So that's the educational barrier with dealerships. And so that's what we've really focused on is creating a solution by which in the showroom and sales experience, you can both train dealers and also provide them with a solution that brands your product, the fuel type, for the consumer visually in a way they can understand it better. And we've deployed Chargeway beacons now in partnership with Portland General Electric and Pacific Power in Oregon, as well as with Avista Utilities in Washington. And we have more programs coming online soon. And the goal of this for every utility is to help every dealership that sells every type of brand of vehicle is to say, well, we know how to help a consumer visualize how our car can work using electricity as a fuel type. We can teach them how to learn how to use it based on, you will encounter different power levels, and you also potentially have different plug types you can use. And then lastly, showing them how they can trust electric fuel as a fuel for transportation away from home, and not just feel like they have to go home to charge every night. And this also then goes into, well, how does the utility then discuss incentives? And Andre hit on this too, is during the research process, that's important, but also during the sales process, how do we help dealerships explain those benefits during the purchase process? And through the beacon, we've built in for Chargeway information that is branded to the utility related to what is their cost of fuel on their electric bill that they will see driving this car, or what kind of home charging can they purchase and utilize that at home. And this brings the brand of the utility into the showroom of the auto dealership and with the purchase products or purchase process of the product of the car. And this then leads to, again, the driver solution, which is you are having a consistent message with the driver. So the dealerships can then have a product they can hand over to drivers to say, we didn't just talk about this in the showroom, we can put this in your pocket, and it gives you confidence during ownership. And this then translates back to how the utility played a role in a better ownership experience for drivers, which then creates for any make and model vehicle experience an easy way to use electricity as a fuel type. And the dealerships, again, they need this type of support, and the utilities play a vital role in explaining this, because the automakers, they don't make fuel. They don't see this as their problem. Whereas the utilities that are making this effort for both infrastructure and outreach can play a role in making this easier. And then again, the end of the customer journey for the fueling experience is you can have then labeling at charging stations that are in your utility's service area that is consistent with the message they receive through research, as well as through purchase process and the tools they have in their pocket. And then that creates that customer journey we discussed that allows a dealership to sell more confidently, but it also allows a consumer to buy more confidently when it comes to an electric car. And that is at the core and at the heart of electric vehicle adoption is happiness and comfort in using the product. And it's not just about the car. It truly is about how they understand how to use that new fuel type.
This is Javier-Barry with DNR International. So what I would add to that, and thanks, Matt, for that, is that in terms of approaching dealerships and salespeople, what utilities have done, I've observed over the years, something really well. And an example of that is building their trade ally networks. I know that there are trade ally networks across the country, whether it's heat pump or air conditioner installers, electrical contractors, and so in a way, it's sort of moving from that, something that they've done well, building relationships, and it's about approaching dealerships and salespeople, approaching the dealerships with an offer to partner and an offer to start building a relationship, developing a partnership, and in that partnership, it's the ability for the utility with all its customers to drive those customers to the EV dealerships, the dealerships that offer EVs, send those customers to them as actual leads. And we have some tools available that would drive those customers directly to the dealerships. Identifying the dealerships and direct them to vetted dealerships. And so that is one thing that utilities can do to kind of help the dealership sell. They want to sell vehicles, and Matt's absolutely right. There's definitely an element of education and making sure that the dealerships have the information about the different incentives that are available. And so there's an educational piece, but then also there's a piece that's pretty critical as well, that EV dealerships or dealerships that sell not only EVs but the incumbent gas-powered vehicles, that they commit that if your utility customer or your cooperative member goes to them looking for an EV, that they won't try to convert them to a gas-powered vehicle. But all this is predicated on building that relationship and in establishing trust, and building that partnership and that ally network.
Great. Thanks to both of you. And let's shift gears a little bit. So Brian from Clean Power Research. EV shoppers are often faced with a number of questions about making the switch to EVs, particularly the financial aspects, such as the impact of their utility bill and what financial incentives are available. How can utility providers effectively answer those questions in an engaging and informative way?
Yeah, Kelly, you said it, and Andre touched on it earlier, but EV shoppers have many questions. When we're talking about big ticket new technologies like EVs, people are trying to make informed financial decisions. It's a much different buying journey compared to, say, a $300 smart thermostat. Because each customer is unique, blanket answers to their most common questions are not always meaningful and sometimes can be just plain incorrect. What applies to one customer might not apply to another, for instance. So static website educational content is not only tough to get customers to slog through, but the entire time they're not really sure which of it applies to their unique situation. So, do I qualify for that incentive? Am I eligible for that rate plan? Does my chosen EV qualify for that incentive, et cetera? So with these big ticket purchases like EVs, providing inaccurate advice is pretty risky. There's real money on the line compared to, for instance, the smart thermostat example. It's important to get this right for both the customer and the utility. Financial questions are obviously top of the list for customers. At the center of these financial questions are electric fuel costs, and utilities are clearly the go-to experts when it comes to electric rates and bills. But the details matter when it comes to calculating these. Getting it right means considering customers' current electricity usage and pairing that with a detailed rate database and accurate bill calculation engines that can adapt as your rates change over time. You need to consider vehicle and charger specs, driving and charging behavior. You need to consider rate eligibility. For instance, rate advice might differ if you're speaking to a low-income customer or a net metering customer. And how these behavioral and how behavioral or technological measures are going to change the customer's load in the future are important to take into consideration. For instance, a customer adding solar to their roof along with the purchase of a new EV is going to have a very different bill and possibly different rate options to choose from. And these are real scenarios out there that you have to account for when you're engaging and providing trusted advice to your customers. We need personalized answers to effectively educate customers on new technologies like EVs. But in order to deliver that trusted advice instantly and of course, cost effectively, we need self-service tools. Because the answers to the most common customer questions are so interrelated, we believe that the best customer experience is an interactive and a cohesive one, not multiple fragmented tools that each answer one question but don't interoperate with each other, and not text-heavy web pages with long static content. With the right data sets and the models that are working behind the scenes, the customer can walk step by step through a personalized EV educational experience. For example, with our EV engagement product, Watt Plan Advisor, you can educate customers on the best times to charge and how long charging at home is going to take based off of their unique situation. And you can connect the dots as to how their driving and charging behavior will then impact their projected new electric bills and which rate plan is actually best for them.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Brian.
I was trying to go to animation and the animation wasn't working. But yeah, I just had one last couple of things, Kelly. I was just saying that you connect the dots to choosing the best rate plan, and then obviously how choosing the best rate plan can have a significant impact on their total cost to own an EV. If you're converging this customer experience into a cohesive one, doesn't mean you have to sacrifice usability. If you're working with a software team or a software vendor that's developing software with a customer-centric mindset, and they're iteratively prototyping and testing and validating new features, then you can develop a tool that's both comprehensive and user-friendly. And we believe we're doing that with our product, Watt Plan Advisor, and the over 20 utilities that use this product. We're delivering trusted EV advice to their customers and answering those most common customer questions through cohesive, personalized EV education experiences. But it's a journey, not a destination, and we continue to grow and adapt our product and solutions to meet the needs of our utilities and their customers, of course. So, Kelly, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. So you focused mostly on questions and solutions for potential EV drivers, but what about existing EV drivers? How can utilities engage with those customers?
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's something we're hearing more and more about from our utility partners. And in some cases they have an EV time of use rate, the utilities that we work with, but they know that only half their EV drivers are actually even on that rate, and that's important to them is driving that pricing signal into customer charging behavior to obviously optimize the load on their grid. So it's important for them to engage and educate those customers on the benefits of rate switching, for instance. In planning an EV engagement strategy, utilities should definitely think about this and think about the complete customer journey and what role they can play in that. Existing EV drivers are going to look to their utility provider for, of course, rate and rebate and charger information. They'll also look for advice on how adding a second or third EV to their home fleet is going to impact their electric bill, or how enrolling in a green pricing plan can green up their carbon footprint, including the increased load due to home EV charging. We've built our products here at Clean Power Research to handle this new type of emerging customer, the EV driver, and the questions that they're going to have. And for instance, we can tell an EV driver if there's a better rate for them, and we can facilitate the enrollment in that rate plan using our Power Clerk product, which is a workflow automation product that manages utility energy programs. So whether it's rates or EV or charger rebate programs, of course, educating and facilitating enrollment in those for existing drivers are going to be key points in the customer journey where utilities, I think can play a significant role. And obviously, as a customer segment, the EV driver, it's only a growing customer segment and becoming more important. So definitely something to consider and focus on.
Great, thank you. All right, and so now I'd like to take a step back and talk about some general strategies for utilities that are jumping into this space. Next question is for you, Olivier of ZappyRide. how should utilities think about customer engagement more generally, and how do the various pieces work together?
Yeah, great question, Kelly. This is really, beyond the tools and the tactics and the details. This is really a question we get a lot from utilities. I think a lot of utilities see EVs coming, and we get a lot of questions around where should we play? How can we best use our dollars? How can we maximize impact? So, obviously, leading utilities are moving in the center of the EV ecosystem. Going back a little bit to what Matt was saying, the value chain is changing. There's billions of dollars being moved away from your traditional petroleum-based companies to utilities. And I think people are starting to wonder, what is the role of the utility in this new ecosystem? And clearly you have a few leaders who are saying, we want to do everything. We would sell EVs if we could, right, to the extent that it's legally possible. And they want to become the place for customers to do everything. Engage dealerships, find about public charging, home charging, etc. But I want to keep in mind the fact that this is not universal, right? We talk to many utilities from large IOUs to small munis and co-ops. And the first decision that needs to be made is, how far do I want to go, right? How much do I want to stretch my capabilities to incorporate customer experiences that I'm not very familiar with, right? We're starting from a home base of rates. We're used to selling power. We're used to charging certain amounts of that power. And of course, there's EV rates. It's kind of the core, the basic element of customer engagement that needs to be there as a utility. And then increasingly people are saying, well, maybe I should advise my customers on home charging and then provide recommendations on specific hardware and when to charge, which is a natural extension of rates. Others are saying, well, I want to go one step further and really provide my customer with trusted vehicle information, not just an old list of vehicles, but really help them think about what does it mean for them to have a new vehicle in their life, right? Remember, the customer doesn't think of a car the way we utility people think of, right? It's not just a load. It's a lifestyle choice. It's a change in the way you live your life day in, day out. And the electric part of it is a small fraction. Vehicle purchases are 70% emotional, right? So doing this well requires engaging customer at that level. And then further away from the existing utility expertise is dealers. And, we've heard many times that engaging dealers is challenging. Oftentimes, the utility folks get literally a door slammed in the face, right? When they show up to a dealer and they say, hey, I want to help. And the dealer is like, well, there's no way you can help. I don't believe you can help, and things like that. And that's why what Matt's doing is really important. What Chargeway is doing is really important because there's a need for tools, there's a need for hardware, there's a need for new ways to engage dealers that didn't exist beforehand. And frankly here, some clients say, you know what, we are not going to spend ratepayer dollars on anything else beyond our core business. And that's totally fair, and that's a reasonable position to take. Again, others are saying, we want to go all the way. We want to be the be-all and end-all for our customers. And it's a strategic decision that needs to be, made in a leadership circle and sometimes in a relationship with PUCs, who have a say, of course, in how the money is spent. Once utilities know how far they want to go, there's a question around, okay, we have the strategy, but then how do we build these capabilities? How do we build something that's really customer-centric? And so there's a couple of pieces here. We think 6 pieces. Outreach, awareness, very important. Very few people still know about EVs. Automated support, of course, software tools, which has to be high quality, integrated, connected to the other pieces. Human support comes together with that, right? Making sure it's not just websites, but it's also people answering questions. And then depending on how far you want to go, integrating with the value chain, integrating internally because increasingly we see disconnects within the utility on what the EV programs are. And then metrics. Metric is something that's really key that I think we don't talk about enough in the industry. We help our clients think a lot about the ROI on customer engagement, and they use that information to pitch to their board, to their PUC, saying, we spend this amount on customer engagement. This is what we get out of it in terms of customer satisfaction, in terms of increased sales. And, oftentimes we see programs that are not properly tracked, and they're difficult to maintain, frankly, because it's hard to communicate the impact. So we always urge folks to think hard about metrics. What does that look like in practice? This is one example amongst many. We work with PG&E, and you can go to ev.pge.com, which is a comprehensive customer engagement platform. That is both at edmunds.com, if you wish, for car selection and car analysis, and really bringing in that emotional aspect of the car purchase, as well as the math, right? The math of cost of ownership, cost of fueling, all the basics that need to be there. Rate analysis, making sure that the customer knows what rate works best for them based on what they charge, helping them switch rates. All of that is really essential. And we've gotten really, really good results, a lot of traffic, a lot of new rebates being processed that would otherwise not be processed because customers didn't know they existed. And really great feedback. That's really what we look for. When the customer is really impressed by what the utility is providing and didn't expect such a high level of quality, that makes our days over here at Zappy. So a couple closing thoughts on the do's and don'ts. We believe that it's important to think strategically, not just, put a tool up there and forget about it, which sadly happens very often still. Knowing the customers, making sure that we address their questions. Customers in the Northeast have very different questions than customers in the Southwest. Urban customers versus rural customers have different questions, etc. Earning credibility, that's very important, right? If you ask customers where do they get their data from in terms of cars, the utility never comes up, right? It's always at the bottom of the list. And so we need to earn our credibility. Oftentimes when there's the wrong data on a website, we lose credibility. So something to keep in mind. Being cost effective about outreach, that's a key one. We see folks spending a lot of money on outreach in ways that are not necessarily cost effective. And there are best practices now that can be used to do it well. And again, metrics. In terms of the don't, again, poor solutions, cheap solutions, things that don't look very high quality will not have an effect on customers. If it's too quantitative, it's too many numbers, too many dollar signs, people will get lost. And then there's something to learn from the energy efficiency world, we think. But there's also a certain amount of distance. And refrigerators and EVs are very different. And we need to make sure we don't just copy-paste things from the energy efficiency world. Did that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, that's great, Olivier. So you talked some about metrics and KPIs and how they are certainly really important to measure. But how have you seen utilities actually doing this in real time? And how do we know that, in the case of some of the larger investor-owned utilities, that ratepayer funds are spent appropriately?
Great question. So I would say two things. As far as metrics themselves, you have the easy kind, right, and the hard kind. So the easy kind is the online metrics. How much traffic you get, how much time people spend on your site, some of the online feedback. That's great. The hard part is really measuring the overall customer journey. Catching the customer at different stages of their journey. In the physical part of their journey, when they're going to a dealership or talking to their friends, and evaluating impact overall, right? Not just online. And I think the industry as a whole is struggling to catch some of these more comprehensive metrics that are not just website metrics. We are trying to help by establishing benchmarks. So we encourage our clients to measure customer engagement at the dealership, customer engagement when they submit their incentive application. So in other words, catching the customer at times that it's hard to do, but really, really valuable. And we're collecting, as I said, benchmarks. So what does a good amount of traffic look like for a good customer engagement website? What kind of net promoter score should you expect across the board in various situations? We're collecting all this and kind of comparing different efforts against each other. And nothing to publish so far, but something you'll hear about from us in the future.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that. Thanks, Olivier. All right, so before we shift over to audience questions, I see we've got a lot of them coming in, so thank you, and keep those coming. I've got a question for you, Mark, with FleetCarma. So we've heard from our previous 3 guests about some of the challenges associated with promoting electric vehicles, but what happens when electric vehicles are here in the masses? What are some of the key challenges that electric utilities will need to prepare for to manage electric vehicle charging at scale with the additional load these vehicles will put on the grid?
Thanks, Kelly. That's a really great question. If I could just ask to advance the slide, perfect, thank you. And I think really because all the great work by folks, on today's call and others as well, there's been great positive change in the marketplace, and consumers are more educated about electric vehicles than ever. And as a result, there has been a steady increase in rates of adoption. We know that EVs are coming, and if we look back just 5 years ago, in 2014, there were roughly 100,000 EVs sold across the U.S. in the entire year. And today we're on pace for about 400,000 vehicles sold this year alone, with about 40% of those being a Tesla Model 3. So as an industry, we're overly cautious. However, I think we can conclusively say that EVs are now coming. So how can utilities get ready for electric vehicles? We believe that as utilities continue to promote electric vehicles, they should also start preparing for them as well. So a gentleman from Rocky Mountain Institute said once that failing to prepare for EV growth with grid upgrades and rate design reforms could leave utilities flat-footed, and when this new load materializes. So EVs are just over about 1% of total vehicle sales today, but 11,000 gigawatt hours of load is about $1.5 billion in annual electricity sales that utilities will need to accommodate within their current planning horizons. And are utilities and system operators ready for that? That's the million-dollar question. So if you go to the next slide, how do we promote and prepare for electric vehicles at the same time? And we believe there's significantly more opportunity from integrating electric vehicles into the grid for utilities than risks. But first, however, what are some of these risks of not being prepared? Really, they boil down into 2 categories. The first is coincidence with peak demand, so a potentially catastrophic system-wide problem. So with EVs at scale, when they come home from work, plug their vehicles in, turn their lights on, run their appliances, they're adding a lot more demand during these peaking hours. And as more of these vehicles are connecting to the grid, it's only going to increase that issue. So from a system level, coincidence with peak is one risk. The second is more of a neighborhood level risk, and that's clustered charging. So SEPA, Smart Electric Power Alliance, completed a study a couple years ago with SMUD, so Sacramento Municipal Utility District in California. And their conclusions were that without integrated DER planning for mass EV adoption, there will be destructive potential on EVs at the local transformer level, or because of EVs at the local transformer level. And one interesting note about this study is that it didn't include some of the newer models that have much higher charging rates and larger batteries, like the Model 3, for example. If we compare the Leaf from 5 years ago, charging at 3.3 kilowatts on a 24-hour kilowatt battery pack, compared to today the Model 3 charging between 8 to 12 kilowatt to charge a 75 kilowatt battery. So fundamentally, the way that vehicles are being sold today and the changes that these new vehicles are having on the utility system at scale is going to be quite substantial. So in addition, FleetCarma recently completed the world's largest EV study called Charge the North. And there were a lot of interesting insights available in that report, which you can find at fleetcarma.com. And in this report, we looked at annual load curves from different groups of electric vehicles that included a different mix of vehicles based on battery capacity. And on one of these days, we found that the long-range battery electric vehicle group created a daily peak of over 72 kilowatts, which could easily damage a residential transformer on its own. So utilities need to be able to plan to properly integrate these vehicles within the grid. So there are risks, but they can be mitigated with proper planning. In terms of opportunities, there's many, and the ones that we like to point out are if the utility is selling more, that the utility is selling more energy, and that they're selling it at the right time. So each month, an EV can use as much energy as a home. So adding EVs to the grid is like adding another customer. So if you're in the business of selling kilowatt hours, this is great for the utility. And selling energy at the right time is really important. So with the increased electric vehicles that are bringing to the grid as mobile and flexible grid assets, there's huge opportunity here for the utility to engage their customer, to encourage them to charge during times that are most desirable for the utility system. Whether this is selling cheaper electricity overnight, matching renewable energy like solar during the day, or in the Northwest with hydro, there's often an abundance of that. So encouraging more off-peak charging allows the utility to sell that electricity instead of, spilling it back into the water. So we believe there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential impacts, in that the best offense is a strong defense. So by promoting electric vehicles and preparing at the same time, you're creating a positive future to integrate these vehicles into the grid most efficiently.
Great. Thanks. And just a very quick follow-up question. How are you finding that EV load management and smart charging differs by utility? And maybe could you possibly share some examples of how some utilities want to manage that load differently than others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I alluded to it a little bit in my last part of my first answer. And the great part that electric vehicles provide utilities is the flexibility. So in some utility service territories like California, for example, that have a abundant amount of solar energy during the day, might want to influence charging at the workplace. This could be a great time to sell cheap electricity, integrate that renewable energy into the grid. EVs provide a perfect solution for that. In other service territories with less solar or renewable energy integration, it's about selling cheaper electricity, and often that is during overnight periods. So the way in which one utility might want to encourage EV charging could be during the day. Sometimes it's over the night. And the great opportunity that electric vehicles provide is the flexibility. So the ability to match that when the utility is selling electricity cheaper and cleaner.
Great. Thanks. Well, thank you all. That was quite the whirlwind of information that we just experienced, and that was all very, very great and helpful. So I want to shift over to a couple of questions. We've only got about 4 or 5 minutes, so we won't be able to get to all of them, but I'd encourage you to reach out to any of the speakers with any remaining questions you may have. There's their contact information. But first, I'll just ask this one. What are some examples of smart outreach for IOUs, in your opinion? And I think, frankly, any of the speakers might be able to respond to this one.
This is Brian from Clean Power Research. I'll just take a few seconds. I mean, as simple as it sounds, I think that we've seen just targeted email outreach and campaigns be pretty successful. At least with one of our utilities, we've seen some really successful numbers in terms of conversions from just simple emails, with some targeting on those who they're segmenting and reaching out to out of their customer base. But that's been pretty successful. I think the other thing that we've seen some of is just nurturing or targeting customers who are already participating in other energy programs, and that tends to be a likely candidate of a customer that might be interested in other ones. So customers that are already part of your green pricing program, community solar, rooftop solar. Those are the types of customer segment, obviously, that might be interested in EVs now or in the future.
Yes, this is Olivier. I would second that. Email is definitely a cheap way. I think one way to look at outreach is how much does it cost to reach 1,000 customers, and then how do you make sure that these customers that you reach come out of the experience with something, right, that moves them forward. In terms of cost per customer, email is definitely pretty close to zero, and so are other options like bill inserts, obviously, or putting messages in areas that customers are used to seeing from the utility. One other extreme which we don't recommend is going on Google and bidding on AdWords, competing with OEMs. We've seen one vendor recommend that, and you end up spending $10, $15 per lead because you're bidding against BMW and Audi and such, and that's not a cost-effective way of doing it. Another thing to consider is events, right? Ride and drive events, auto shows and such. I think we've seen experiences of such events run very cheaply, very cost-effectively, and reaching a lot of customers, converting a lot, and others, being a lot more expensive, smaller in scale, and a lot less efficient. So there's a certain amount of experience that's helpful in being smart around that.
I think this is Matt with Chargeway. I think Olivier brought up a very good point regarding the Google instance about what is it you're investing your money into. And channels, we can discuss channels all day long for how to reach people. There are a variety of very cost-effective ways to reach people. The important element, I think, that is just constantly overlooked in the EV industry is what is the message? What are we trying to help them understand? And at the end of the day, utilities should not be trying to compete with automakers on how to explain, and reach people on discussing cars. Because at the end of the day, that's still not answering the question that they need answered, which is, how do I make this car work? And I think that's very important. From the takeaway from this call, I invite all people to really challenge themselves, understanding from the utility side is understanding the role that you play in the narrative. And I think that will really help us move the needle on helping consumers understand that they actually have an option for fuel, as opposed to trying to explain to them how a car works that's different, because that is very confusing to many people.
And this is Andre. I would add all good points. In terms of events that Olivier was talking about, social media is also a just nice, simple, easy way to get the message out about what's being done, build up excitement, and get the word out, especially to the folks who are sort of your ambassadors, the current EV owners in your service territories. Their word of mouth and sort of their kind of personal interactions with their friends and neighbors, giving their own, promoting through social media is a nice, simple, effective way to do that as well.
Great. Thank you. Well, in the interest of everyone's time, I think we ought to go ahead and wrap this up. But thank you, each of the speakers that just addressed that last question. I think those were all really well said points. And I would echo those on behalf of Fourth. So just stay tuned. In your inbox, we'll be sending around these slides, as well as a recording of the webinar in case you want to share it to anyone who may have missed the webinar today. And again, feel free to reach out to speakers with any remaining questions you may have. And we hope to see you at our next webinar coming up in a few months. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.